In 2022, Poco launched the F4 and the F4 GT. The former wasn't much of an upgrade over the F3 from the year before, and the GT was a rebadged black sharp phone. For 2023, Poco has taken a different approach. We now have the Poco F5 Pro, which boasts some really impressive specs and still at an accessible price point. So, is it back to winning ways for Poco? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and this is my review of the Poco F5 Pro. If you do like it, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any more of our uploads. And one big thing I'm glad to see for the 2023's flagship F series is the return to focusing on an attractive and comfortable device. The Poco F4 was bland, straight-edged, and quite cheap looking. The F5 Pro couldn't be much further from that. With a number of elements that shows that Xiaomi's sub-brand has been a bit more purposeful about the design for this latest model. The rear panel has curves towards the edges to make it sit comfortably in the hand, and not only that, has run a couple of slim aramid fibre-like strips down the back, one on each side of the phone. This is joined by a rectangular camera protrusion which, rather than just being slapped straight on the phone with no embellishment, features a chamfer on each side. It looks good, attractive even, with an aesthetic that feels classy and quite unique. Our only real complaint about it is that the glossy glass on the back is prone to slipping off things if the phone is placed down on a surface that's not completely straight. It also collects fingerprint smudges really easily, quickly becoming a smeary, foggy mess. Otherwise, it's quite the usual affair. The front is dominated by a large display with skinny bezels around the edges and a small punch-hole camera near the top. There's no headphone port, but there is IP53 splash resistance this year, so it should just about survive getting caught in the rain. Now, in recent years, the trend for Android phone displays has been to equip them with Full HD or 1080p resolution panels. That's true across a wide range of price points. But here, as with many cases, Poco outperforms a lot of its direct competition. The F5 Pro has a WQHD Plus resolution screen, which means from a sharpness perspective, it's on par with the S23 Ultra, the Xiaomi 13 Pro, and the OnePlus 11. Now, like most QHD Plus equivalent resolutions, it's not enabled by default. Out of the box, the resolution is set to 1080p. The idea being that if you set it to a lower resolution, it drains less battery. And based on my testing, it certainly helps. Now, as I've discovered with so many devices, the Full HD Plus setting is more than enough to give you sharp images. You struggle to see individual pixels close up, but there's no denying the extra sharpness you get from enabling the full resolution. Smaller, finer details become crisper and cleaner. Now, sharpness isn't its only strength. It's bright, colour-rich, and features a few other flagship-level strengths. One underappreciated capability is the number of brightness levels, and the speed at which it can adapt and change to match its surroundings. The auto brightness is so natural and smooth that I never once had to reach for the brightness slider in the drop-down control center, because rather than just jumping from one brightness to another in an awkward step, it gradually ramps up or decreases, to the point where you can't really see it happening. It's far less jarring than what I've seen on a number of other phones, particularly in this mid-range price market. What's more, its typical screen brightness can reach up to 1000 nits when necessary, with peaks when required for small bright spots in HDR video that can reach up to 1400 nits. That's effectively as high as what you could find on a lot of other premium smartphones that cost a lot more. You even get refresh rates up to 120 Hz, so everything gliding on the screen's interface is smooth and sharp consistently. It does have a kind of adaptive refresh technology, and that's to say it can switch between 60 and 120, but you don't get the more granular shifting or dropping as low as 1 Hz like you do on some more expensive phones. Still, you're likely never going to notice that when you're watching movies or gaming. The end result is a really good screen for its position in the market. Details are crisp and it's really bright, allowing you to see quite clearly even when it's bright daylight outside. In its default color setting, I found it a bit too contrast heavy and oversaturated, but there's plenty of customization available to tweak that. I found setting it to sRGB in the advanced display settings produced the colors that I prefer, but there's a lot of opportunity here to tweak it until you're completely happy. Now, I've spoken a lot recently about MIUI software on Poco phones. Some of the choices are counterintuitive and require some taming. Nothing has changed here on the Android 13 based Poco F5 Pro. Swiping down from the top will deliver notifications or control center, depending on whether you swipe on the right or the left. You don't get notifications or quick settings together unless you enable it. One thing I am happy about is that it doesn't seem as insistent to make you try the wallpaper carousel this time. It does, however, continue to whisk you off into the theme store whenever you want to change your ringtone or wallpaper, which can be a bit frustrating. It also defaults to spreading your apps across the home screens when you first set it up, which, again, quite frustrating. Now, on the whole, the software is still pretty heavy-handed, but it is fluid and very customizable, so it's not all bad. It's just not as light and easy to use as what you might get on a Pixel, a Nokia, or a Motorola phone. Moving on to performance, and in the section of the market where the Poco competes, we're used to seeing phones with a decent but not quite flagship processor inside. Think of the likes of the Galaxy A54 or the top-level OnePlus Nord models, and you get a capable but not super speedy platform running the show. It's safe to say Poco's gone somewhere the other mid-rangers haven't really gone before. Inside, you'll find the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, which until recently was the most powerful and efficient Snapdragon platform on the market. It's what's inside the likes of the Galaxy Z Fold 4, Samsung's most expensive phone right now, as well as the OnePlus 10T, the Xiaomi 12T Pro, and the Asus ROG Phone 6 Pro. That's to say it's not a mid-range processor powering this phone at all. It may not be the most up-to-date flagship chipset, but it is a considerable step up from the Snapdragon 870, which powered both the Poco F4 and the F3 before it. Poco's not messing about here. The end result is exactly what you'd expect from a phone with this engine. Speed. It flies through every task without stutter or delayed response. That's partly down to the chipset, but also the result of the 120Hz display ensuring animation stays smooth and fast, plus there's 12GB of RAM, plus 3 extra borrowed from the storage when it needs it. All told, it's a speedy, powerful system. Another benefit of the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is that it doesn't seem to get too hot under load. You could play games for extended periods and the phone rarely felt too warm to the touch. The feeling of speed and fluidity is matched by the battery refill times as well. Its 67-watt adapter means even a 10 to 15 minute top-up is enough to get you through almost an entire day. A complete refill from empty takes roughly 40 minutes. It's the type of speed that allows you to change your charging habits. With 67-watt wired charging, you don't need to plug your phone in overnight every night. You can pretty much just wait for it to drop to the dreaded 20% mark whenever that is, plug it in for 15 minutes or so, and pick it up again. Not that its battery would cause you any real concern anyway. Its 5160 mAh battery is pretty generous. And even with the Quad HD Plus resolution enabled and my own typical use most days, I'd finish with near enough 40% left over at the end of the day. That's with taking the phone off charge at about 8 AM, using it for 2 to 3 hours a day, usually split between Twitter, casual gaming, web browsing and YouTube, and going to bed at 11 o'clock at night. That meant typically getting to mid-afternoon on a second day before wanting to plug it in to charge. It can refill wirelessly too this year, making it even more convenient to top it up. Now, there's one area that's not quite as up to flagship levels as the rest of the phone. It's the camera department. The primary 64 megapixel camera is fine enough, but it's joined by 2 quite low resolution sensors. Those are the 8 megapixel ultra-wide and the 2 megapixel macro, both noticeably poorer than the main camera. In good daylight, you can get relatively strong images from the main camera, but not as strong as what we saw from the likes of the Galaxy A54 or the Pixel 6a. The pictures processed from the Poco phone have quite a dark, crushed look to them in some light conditions, especially when there's lots of contrasting shadow and bright light. In the landscapes, for instance, you'll notice the trees in the background become something of a featureless, blotchy detail in the background, particularly when you hit the 2x zoom, which digitally zooms in using the main camera. You can still get images with lots of vibrant colour, so it's not a bad camera at all. And since you can use the 2x zoom function to good effect, as long as you're not dealing with complicated subjects with lots of fine detail, it makes more sense to use that than trying to use the macro camera. The ultra-wide camera shots just aren't as good as the primary camera. They're considerably less detailed, with slightly more muted colours and noisier in the shadows, particularly from images taken in low light situations. My own feeling with the F5 Pro is one I've not really felt from Poco since the F3 2 years ago. It's really astonishing value for money, as long as camera is not your main concern. You get a stunning big display, great battery life, and real flagship levels of performance in a phone that costs less than half what ultra premium phones cost. It's really good value for money. If Poco could learn to tame the MIUI software and deliver a cleaner user interface, less crushed photos from the main camera, it would be near enough perfect. Adding wireless charging, a Quad HD display, and a more thoughtful design though, has improved things massively from the F4. Let me know what you think of the latest Poco F series phone in the comments below, or you can grab me on Twitter. I'm at Cam Bunton. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and tap the notification bell, and that way you won't miss any more of our uploads. I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.